Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dr. Ian Schulman, and I am delighted to be joined today by Stephanie Quinto of Catching Dreams Sleep and Behavior Consulting. Stephanie, welcome.
Hi, so happy to be here.
So, a lot of patients talk to me and they want to know about helping their child sleep. And I don't think many people really realize that a sleep coach is available. So, first off, what exactly is a sleep coach? What do you do?
So love that question because when I was a first-time mom, I didn't know there was such thing as a sleep coach either. So basically, in a very simple form, a sleep coach is someone who helps you improve your child's sleep. Not all sleep coaches are created equally, quote unquote. So if you are interested in working with a sleep coach, just make sure you're a good fit and check and see what their training is, because there's all different kinds of programs and there isn't like a governing body for sleep consulting. So just be aware. But basically, the difference with having a sleep coach or not having a sleep coach is kind of the difference between looking up directions to go somewhere from Google Maps and having like a printout of where to go when you don't know where you're going for your destination, versus having like a GPS and Siri talking to you the whole way through to get there. So that's what I do. So I support families on their whole journey to improving sleep.
That's awesome. How'd you get into it? It doesn't seem like something that most people would initially expect as a career. So what brought you into this world?
Yeah, so when I was a first-time mom, I had no idea what I was doing about sleep. My daughter, who you know, was not a good sleeper. We were up all night. I was either nursing her back to sleep or putting in the pacifier. It was just a wreck. She never napped. It was terrible. And one of my girlfriends was like, "You need a sleep coach." And I was like, "What? There's a sleep coach? What is that?" So I hired a sleep coach when my daughter was 8 months old, and my whole life got better like very quickly, because I just didn't know anything and learned so much from her to teach my daughter to sleep. And then that experience, I was just like obsessed with sleep and loved the science behind it, loved learning about it. So then I enrolled at the Family Sleep Institute, got my certification, and here I am.
It's interesting that you say that because I hear a lot from parents. They almost feel judged by the quality of their child's sleep. You hear this all the time, like, "Oh, are they a good baby? Are they letting you sleep?"
I hate that question.
And it's hard because I think people have this unfair expectation of what's normal. And they think that if their baby is not sleeping through the night from day one, then there's something wrong, or that they're not, they don't have a good baby.
Yeah.
So, what's normal for a newborn? How does that change throughout their development?
So sleeping through the night is not normal for a newborn.
It's not.
It's not healthy, it's not safe. But I hate when people are like, "Is she a good baby?" Of course she's a good baby. She's a baby. All babies are good babies. All
Yeah.
babies are good. You're born good, right? So yeah, what they mean is, does she sleep well, right? So the newborn days, like those first 8 weeks, I call like survival mode. Like you are just doing what you need to do to get your baby sleep and get you sleep. Like it's totally normal for sleep to be completely disorganized. There's day-night confusion you're dealing with, very normal for babies to sleep more during the day and less during the night. And it's normal. You're not doing anything wrong. So that I talk to parents about that in my newborn consults, because a lot of the time there's this anxiety about, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, and you're not doing anything wrong. That's just how babies are at that age. And then, after between 8 and 16 weeks, things get a little better, right? Day-night confusion starts to go away, but they're still waking through the night. They're still feeding through the night. You might get some 4 or 6 hour stretches here and there, and you're like, praise, but it's not, your baby's not sleeping through the night at that age. Like it's just not happening.
I think most parents don't realize that, when babies come into this world, they're coming from this environment in utero that is climate controlled, sound controlled. They're
Yeah.
used to hearing the sound of, the blood vessels passing through the, next to the uterus. They're used to feeling mom's movement, the warmth, the compression, the tightness. And then they enter out into this world that is just so overwhelming in the sensory input. There's
Yes,
bright
absolutely.
light, there's loud noises, especially if you have siblings. There's just so much sensory input. And very often those first couple of weeks, baby is trying to protect their input, trying to protect their nervous system. And so they'll sleep during the day and be more awake at night when things are calmer and when mom's milk is more productive. And so it's hard because you see a lot of parents come in those first couple of weeks and they don't necessarily realize that this is not only appropriate behavior, it's perfectly normal. And it's just about kind of sleeping when baby sleeps and trying to get through that initial stage.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
all of that. And there's things, we can do that to help them regulate their nervous system, and recreate that environment that they've been used to, using white noise, swaddling, those are wonderful things that comfort a newborn. I know with my second child, when I knew this about white noise, I would carry around a little portable sound machine. I brought it to your office, and it's so soothing to them. And so there's tons of things we can do to help them protect their nervous system and get sleep. But it's not going to be they're not sleeping 7 to 7, it's just not normal.
No. And I think a big part of it comes into expectations. People don't, they hear these stories of babies sleeping through the night from day one, and they don't necessarily realize that that may not be a healthy thing for that child, right? And that what their baby is going through is perfectly appropriate. But what is something that parents can do to create good sleep habits from the start? You mentioned the swaddling, you mentioned the white noise. It's one of the reasons why I love baby wearing, because it keeps baby close and recreates that in-womb environment. But what are some things that parents can do to help establish those sleeping patterns from the start?
Yeah. So first I want to say that contact naps are totally normal during those newborn days. It's totally fine to rock your baby to sleep and hold them while they're sleeping. All that's normal and healthy. You can't spoil a baby, quote unquote, right?
No.
Don't worry about creating bad habits,
You're not going to overlove a newborn.
No, you're not. You're definitely not. But what you can do is when you do want to try to put them down for some sleep in the crib, then you start creating a routine, and you can start creating a routine literally from day one if you want to. I recommend parents really try to start doing it a little more consistently, around 2 to 3 months, and just create some kind of soothing routine. 5 to 10 minutes, doesn't have to be long. Your baby isn't awake that long to begin with. So just a soothing routine. Go into the room, rock a little, sing a little, read a book if you want, just something to start cueing them that sleepy time is coming, and they'll build off of that for the next, their whole childhood, really. You always are going to have some kind of bedtime or nap time routine. So that's a really good pillar to start with. And then during those newborn days, I always recommend parents being very mindful of wake windows and keeping one eye on the clock, but also one eye on the baby. So don't just say, oh, the book says it's a 60-minute wake window at this time, so we're going to put her down every 60 minutes. So keep that in mind, but also watch your baby and learn their sleepy cues. You just want to avoid them becoming overtired, because then they get into that nervous system, so.
There's this balance that I think people lose sight of. We live as parents in our brain trying to analyze everything and trying to control everything. And in some respects, this is a relationship that's dynamic, that's evolving as baby is evolving and growing. And
absolutely.
Listening to their cues, being able to observe where they are and what their individual needs are important. And there's going to be certain times of the day where your baby is awake a little bit more, and other times where their naps are going to feel kind of on top of one another. But as long as you, like you said, paying attention to both the schedule and your baby's needs, I think there's a good balance there.
Yeah, it's all about the balance.
And that's a great kind of segue, because I always hear about sleep training, and you hear about cry it out method, and that what we're going to be doing is putting baby in a room, shutting the door, and not opening it for 12 hours. And that never really appealed to me. You know, I don't know any parent who loves listening to their child cry.
Nobody does. No,
Um,
nobody.
but on the opposite end is the idea of like attachment parenting, where, you know, everything is based on your baby's needs and there's kind of no like give or take. There's no working with them to try to establish healthier habits.
Right.
So I've always said that it has to work for both parent and baby. But
Yes.
from your perspective as an expert, where's that balance between the cry it out and the attachment? And does that debate even make sense anymore?
So first, I want to say that formal sleep training can't happen until at least the baby's 4 months old, minimum.
Mm.
I like to do it closer to 5 months personally. So
Is
before
that,
that,
out
you're
of
not doing,
curiosity, is that adjusted for age if like the baby was
yes,
premature?
absolutely adjusted, always adjusted age.
Yeah.
So that's just number one. So when we're talking about like establishing healthy sleep in newborn, we're practicing, you know, with some independent sleep and putting baby down awake and seeing what they can do, but we're not leaving them to cry. We're not doing any kind of formal sleep training.
Yeah.
So with regard to that debate, honestly, it's not my job if a family comes to me and prefers that less involvement kind of cry it out. It's not my job to judge them. And it's not my job to
No,
judge a family
not at
that
all.
wants to do more of an attachment style, more involvement, gradual approach. My job is to help them figure out what's going to work for their philosophy, what they can be consistent with, and what's going to work for their baby or child's temperament too. So it's really, I throw it to the family. All sleep training methods work as long as you're consistent. That's really the number one rule. Be consistent. Whether you're going to do something really direct, like cry it out, or a happy medium between those two, or you're going to be there 100% of the time and gradually decrease your support in the beginning. They all work. You just have to be consistent. So it's whatever the family, works for the family.
I
So
love
there's
that. I think
definitely balance.
just like your baby is an individual, I think
Yeah.
parents, you know, are individual in their personal philosophies and paradigms and what feels right for them. I mean,
Mhm.
ultimately, it's important that as a parent, you know, we're so riddled with guilt and the sense of, are we doing the right thing? I think it's really
Always.
nice to hear that there are things that you can do to work with everybody, and their personal philosophy towards parenting. Now,
Right. And
go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I was just gonna say, and even still, there's not, you see all the books and there's, the methods in the books, but there's not like hard and fast rules that I'm like, oh, we have to do it this method. This is how we do it. Everything can be tweaked, everything can be adjusted. So there are different sleep training methods than cry it out. That is like the number one thing I get on an intro call, and people are like, I don't want to do cry it out. I'm like, okay, great, let's do something else, So it's actually pretty rare that I have a client that wants to do that directive and approach. Usually it's somewhere kind of in the middle between always, attending to the child 100% always,
Yeah.
versus not at all. So
And
they're
I want to reiterate what you said, because I think it's so important, is that sleep training can't happen before 4 to 5 months. You
yes,
know, the thing that parents often forget about is in those first few months, baby's stomach is tiny. It's like the size of a
yes,
cherry at birth. And they need to feed more regularly because
mhm,
it's what sustains them and gives them the nutrition and hydration necessary to sustain life. And
yes,
so, you know, what might be okay a little bit later as that child gets older and gets bigger and is able to hold more in their stomach for longer periods of time, probably not going to be appropriate at a younger age. So I think that's to me the big take home message is, 4 to 5 months you can start doing it, but anything before that, and it might not be appropriate for that child.
yes. And like I said, there are things we can do to help start that foundation during the newborn time. And in my newborn consult, I go through a whole timeline and exactly how to help your baby practice falling asleep on their own, in a very gradual, supportive way. So doing that can be a huge make sleep hugely better. I did it with my second child, not my first. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And we didn't have to sleep train because she learned really early on how to fall asleep herself while being really supported. But I also want to speak to what you were saying about the feeding. So another misconception is that you can't sleep train and still have night feedings, and you 100% can.
Hmm.
Okay. So when I'm talking about a 5-month-old baby and we're sleep training, more often than not, we're also still doing 1, maybe 2 night feedings. So there is a difference between a baby needing a nutritional feeding versus needing to always be nursed back to sleep or fed back to sleep. So that's the difference. So I always have the client check in with their pediatrician to see how many feedings that the baby needs nutritionally. And then we just work on a schedule based on that. And also based on the parents' comfort level, because sometimes pediatricians are like, they don't need a feeding. And mom's like, I still really want to do one. I'm like, okay, let's do it. You know, that's totally fine.
It's interesting because, you know, there's a lot of times where parents will tell me that they wake up and their baby latches and almost immediately falls back asleep. And then as soon as they take the baby off and put them down, they wake up. And to me, that screams less of a nutritional feeding, the word that you used, and more of like a comfort suckling as a way of soothing themselves.
Right.
And you know, I think especially when women are breastfeeding, it's important for them to establish that relationship early. And very often I will tell them that allowing baby to use you as a pacifier can be really good for stimulating milk production and can be great for helping strengthen baby's latch. But it's also something that, as you know, when it happens at night, if it's not for nutritional purposes, then we can maybe find other ways to help them soothe themselves so they're not constantly attached to you.
Exactly. And during those newborn months, like, you know, you want to establish that milk supply. Like that's really important. So that's great. But yes, as they get older, we want to start moving away from that and focusing on some other ways to teach them to soothe themselves. Yeah.
Awesome. You know, I always notice that there are stages of the development that seem to alter sleeping patterns, right? You hear about the 4-month sleep regression, but I know, I mean, teething kicked my ass, right? Like it was unbelievable what it was like. I mean, I think my son got all 4 molars at the same time.
Oh,
and it was, you know, it was awful. So what are some things that parents should know about as a normal change in sleeping pattern? Because the last thing I want them to do is be consistent, think everything's good, and then hit one of these developmental points that things change and think that somehow they're failing.
Yeah. So you're not failing, you're learning. Okay. So that's number one. And your baby isn't failing, they're learning. So when you hear about all this sleep regression stuff, the 18-month sleep regression, the 2-year-old sleep regression, the 8 to 10-month sleep regression, they're not actually regressions. They are your baby or your toddler growing. Think of all the things that are happening at that age, 8 to 10 months. Okay, so sometimes babies are starting to cruise or crawl and just generally become more mobile and aware of the world, right? 12 months, sometimes we're walking, we're realizing that when our parents leave the room, they don't actually go like they're still there. They don't just disappear. So there's a little bit of a separation anxiety. So all those different ages, it's always related to something developmental. So if sleep was really, really good and all of a sudden your baby's waking in the night or refusing to nap or something, think about what's going on with them. Yeah. Did they suddenly just have like an explosion in language for a 2-year-old? Are they starting to crawl? Some babies, it's really frustrating for parents, but they'll like wake up in the middle of the night and practice walking in the crib. And they're like, what are you doing? You know, and they just like, their little brains like have to practice the skill. And usually once they master whatever developmental milestone is going on, sleep gets better. So as long as you stay consistent with it and don't like start adding in, you know, sleep associations that you don't want to continue with, sleep usually gets better after a couple of weeks, as long as, you know, before they had a pretty good sleep foundation. One thing to keep in mind is during those times, babies are usually exerting a lot more energy than they used to, right? They're learning something new. Their little brains are getting a little more tired. Their bodies are getting more tired. So use an early bedtime. Like, don't let them get overtired. Overtiredness is like the #1 cause for night wakings and waking up early in the morning. So I know it sounds counterintuitive to put your baby down earlier so they sleep, you know, so they don't wake up earlier, but trust me, it works. So,
well, it's interesting you say that. You know, first of all, I blame my son for my 30-year sleep regression. But you know, that idea of babies are going through these big developments, and so they're taking in a lot more, and therefore they could be overtired earlier. I find that a lot of times, especially with newborns, but even older kids, that like witching hour where they're
Oh,
just
yes.
over hysterical and overtired, it
Yeah.
stems from them taking in more sensory input than what the nervous system is capable of handling.
Yes.
And what we tend to find is that by putting kids to sleep earlier, it helps them prevent falling off the cliff into
Yep.
that realm of that really
Mhm.
witching hour fussiness. But that's
Mhm.
also where, from a chiropractic perspective, not to jump on board, but if a child's nervous system is compromised and not able to adapt to the sensory input of the world in which they live, what
Right.
we see is that they reach that cliff much sooner, and they fall deeper into that cavern, or into that gorge, if you will, and they end up having a much longer, harder, emotionally depleting time right before bedtime, and that's
Uh-huh.
when parents are up for
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah.
with the baby that just won't go to sleep. So from a chiropractic perspective, you're absolutely right. If you see the signs that your child is getting overtired or over
Yeah.
stimulated, it's time to calm things down. I think that's a really important thing. And it's also important, make sure your child's nervous system can handle as much as it can handle by making sure that they stay well adjusted.
Yes, 100%. And I always tell my clients, look at their mood between 4 and 5. If things are going bananas at between 4 and 5 o'clock, you need to get them to bed earlier. Whether they're really tired or they're like, like, because that's what kids do. They get hyper when they get really tired.
Yeah.
Not, they get that wired crazy kind of mode. It's like, okay, we need to do an early bedtime tonight.
So what if mom and dad's mood changed between 4 and 5 p.m.?
If only, right? If only we could tuck ourselves into bed and just be like, all right, bye.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Anything that you would like to add, or anything that you think is going to be helpful? I mean, I think it's incredibly, the idea of having an expert who's trained in my child's sleep development and can support our family and our own philosophy and develop good patterns, I think can take the questioning out of it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it still is going to take some involvement from those parents, but it's going to take the
Absolutely.
guesswork out of it. Anything that you'd like to add or think that parents can do on top of it, or any last thoughts that you might have?
Just be consistent. I know I said it before, but like that is the secret sauce to the whole thing. If you're not consistent, whether you're working with a sleep coach or you're just doing it on your own, trying to create better sleep habits, pick something and stay with it. Like if you just pick something and try it for one night, it's not going to work, right? You have to try, you have to let things work, right? You have to give it time. So just be consistent, create a good routine, have a good sleep environment. I have a blog post about that. Um, and be consistent and be there for your child, and things, will get better. And if they're not, you can reach out to me.
There's a chiropractic principle in chiropractic philosophy that says there is no process that does not require time.
100%.
And too often we expect things to happen in a moment's notice, and or with very quickly, and it often, if that doesn't happen, it creates anger and anxiety and uncertainty, and it causes people to, I think, um, instead of just keep digging and getting to that mine filled with gold, they end up giving up and turning around. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important, is give it time, whether it's sleep, whether it is breastfeeding, whether
Yep.
it's even your healing journey through chiropractic. It's all related to giving the body time to learn, adapt, get better,
Yes.
and ultimately, I think that's better for the whole family.
Yeah, and I know in my breastfeeding journey with my first, it was hard. And one of my friends said to me, "Never quit on a hard day." And like that, I just
Mhm.
take that into like anything I do now. Whether it's sleep training, whether it's whatever. Anytime you're learning a new skill, it's hard, right?
I
It's
love it.
frustrating. It's hard. So never quit on a hard day. Just keep going.
I love it. That's
And
perfect.
we weren't made to parent alone. Like we weren't made to do this by ourselves. So whether it's sleep, whether it's lactation, whether, it's behavior, just ask for help, from whether it's a quote unquote expert or just a friend, someone you trust. Just we weren't made to parent alone. So just ask for help in whatever you're needing, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to provide links for your company for Catching Dreams, sleep and behavioral consulting, and obviously we'll have this shared on your pages as well. But
Yeah.
I hope this gave some insight and some hope to parents who are struggling or parents who are getting ready for this journey. I mean, sleep is one of those things that it's so important to not only our physical, but our emotional and mental well-being. In the same
Yes.
way, it's just as, if not more important for a developing baby. So
Mhm.
hopefully we can help more people get the support that they need. And I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much, Stephanie Quinto of Catching Dreams, Sleep and Behavioral Consulting.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here, and I hope, I helped some parents out and help their little ones sleep better. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.